What if Congress had responded to Watergate by immunizing the executive branch's lawbreakers and giving Richard Nixon sweeping new powers to snoop? Oh, wait, they just did. They just took 30 years or so to get around to it. Today, the United States Senate, in their vote on FISA, capitulated to the White House on warrantless wiretapping of American citizens. After killing 3 amendments that would have denied immunity to the wiretapping telecom companies or otherwise softened the constitutional blow, the Senate voted at 2:47 p.m. today to deny American citizens their day in court against the companies that helped Mr. Bush with his illegal wiretaps. They voted to deny American citizens the right to judicial protection against unwarranted future eavesdropping. 74 minutes later, President Bush emerged from the White House to announce that Congress, including Democratic Senators Baucus, Bayh, Carper, Casey, Conrad, Feinstein, Inouye, Johnson, Cole, Landrieu, Lincoln, McCaskill, Mikulski, both Nelsons, Pryor, Rockefeller, Salazar, Webb, Whitehouse, and yes, Obama, had given him everything he wanted, turning what could have been a minor updating to let the U.S. eavesdrop on purely overseas calls that happened to come through U.S. switching stations, turning that into unchecked power to listen in on American calls to or from overseas as well. Senator Clinton and 26 other Democrats voted nay. Let's bring in our guest today who worked against this bill and urged his colleagues in the Senate to join him in standing up for the rule of law. Democratic Senator Russ Feingold of Wisconsin. Thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Very good to be on the show.
When Democrats stood up to the president on FISA earlier this year, I think it was widely understood that they looked tough. Republicans tried sort of half-heartedly to go after them for that stance, but it didn't really work. And because of that, I honestly do not understand the politics at work today. Why did a Democratic-led Congress let this pass?
Well, this is a sad moment. It really is a black mark, not only on the Democrats, but on the Congress and really the history of our country. And the same thing, Rachel, happened with regard to the Patriot Act. When we tried to fix it after it had been passed in a flawed way, there was this period of strength where Democrats held firm, and then they collapsed. And the same thing happened again here. This administration, despite its weakness, somehow is able to raise the specter of being, as they say, soft on terrorism. And unfortunately, Democrats who can be so strong on domestic issues somehow collapse. And that's exactly what happened. This is a terrible piece of legislation. It's one of the greatest assaults on the Constitution, I think, in the history of our country. We are going to have to fix it, but it is a dark hour for the Constitution.
You said today that the telecom immunity isn't even what concerns you most about this, that Congress today effectively gave the White House unchecked power to listen in on millions of Americans' phone calls and read our emails. Can you explain what these new powers are that you are so concerned about?
Absolutely. Now, don't get me wrong. The telephone company immunity is a terrible thing. And Senator Dodd and I and others fought hard to get rid of it. It's bad on the merits because it undercuts the rule of law. And it also potentially blocks our ability to find out in court what we believe, which is that the president's warrantless wiretapping program was illegal and a terrible violation of the law. But even more serious is the Title I of the bill. And that's the part where the government is given the ability, potentially, to suck up all bulk communications, all international calls, all emails, all text messages that any American might make to their daughter who's a junior year abroad, a daughter or a son who's a soldier in Iraq, a reporter, a business associate. This is a frightening intrusion, and it has no court supervision whatsoever, really. It is simply allows this amazing expansion of federal power into an area that really has never been allowed before. And that is the most shocking part of the bill. But either one of them is a sufficient reason to say this legislation was a catastrophe and needs to be fixed at some point.
It was stunning enough to see a Congress argue for its own impotence in favor of an all-powerful presidency when that argument was coming from the Republicans. But with today's vote, I think that voters have to be asking if there's any meaningful difference between the parties on executive power, between the Democratic vision of executive power and the GOP's. Certainly your vision of executive power is different from the president's, but can you say the same for your party?
I'm very concerned about it. People have a great deal of right to be disappointed and to look at the 2006 election, both with regard to Iraq, and say, what are they doing? But you know what, Rachel? Having a Democratic president, in particular Barack Obama, should allow us to greatly change this mistake. Barack Obama believes in the Constitution. He's a constitutional scholar. I believe that he will have a better chance to look at these powers that have been given to the executive branch, and even though he'll be running the executive branch, I think he will understand and help take the lead in fixing some of the worst provisions. So this is a huge setback. And it would have been much better for Democrats to stand together and not let it happen in the first place, because it's much harder to change it after the fact. But I do believe that Barack Obama is well positioned, both in terms of his knowledge and his background and his beliefs, to correct this. And so I do think that people have a right to be disappointed, but they also have a right to hope for change on this issue in particular, starting in January.
It is heartening to hear your optimism on the prospect of Obama's presidency on this issue, but of course his vote today led a lot of us who see this as a real abrogation of the Fourth Amendment to be very concerned.
Well, it was the wrong vote, and any Democrat that voted that way was not voting according to what the people in the Democratic Party clearly want.
Yeah.
But, you know, we'll pull together after the election. We'll lay the case out again. This is what this process did, I think, in the last few months. We made it much more clear to the American people about the invasion of their privacy and their rights that's occurring. And as people take a closer look at it, when we don't have a president who believes in this crazy notion of executive power, if we have a Democrat House and Senate, we may actually be able to fix this. And I'm not optimistic about it being done right anytime in the near future, but I do have good feelings about the potential to do it starting next year.
Senator Feingold, just one last question for you. The prospect has been raised that a President Obama might bring criminal prosecutions against the telecoms or against the administration who ordered this illegal wiretapping, even with this civil immunity sort of having been passed in this group. Do you, in this bill, do you think that's a realistic prospect, and do you think that's something that civil libertarians ought to pressure the Obama campaign on?
You know, I'm not ready to weigh into that particular approach. I'll be taking a look at it. I've been focused on trying to get this right, and you know, I and others will look at this on Judiciary Committee, Intelligence Committee, and of course a new president will have a chance to look at it. But I'm not ready to weigh in on that point.
Senator Russ Feingold, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.